Bienvenidos! Today we're going to learn about verbs like gustar in Spanish. In Spanish, in order to use the verb gustar and verbs like gustar, we have to understand a different way of thinking. As we've already learned, foreign language is more than just translating one word for another because it actually represents a whole different way of thinking and looking at the world. And gustar is a perfect example of this because in Spanish we can't actually like things. We can't say, I like ice cream. We can't say, he likes to read. Because in Spanish, we can't actively like things. Instead, the concept in Spanish is that things are pleasing to us. So in Spanish, the objects doing the action are acting on us, on the people. Whereas in English, it's kind of the reverse. We are actually doing the active action and liking the things. And the reason this is really important is because in Spanish, we have to conjugate the verbs according to the subject, according to who's ever doing the action. So in Spanish with gustar and verbs like gustar, the subject is going to be the thing and the recipient is going to be me. Like if I like ice cream in Spanish, the ice cream is going to be doing the action. It's going to be pleasing me. So we're going to need to know how to use indirect object pronouns in order to use the verb gustar and verbs like gustar, because we're going to have a subject, we're going to have the verb, and then we're going to have somebody receiving the action of that verb. So let's look at an example here. Let's look at some verbs first that are like gustar. We have gustar, which normally in English is translated as to like, but we really know now that it means to be pleasing to or to please. Interesar, to be interesting to. Encantar, to be enchanted by. Things are enchanting to me. Fascinar, things are fascinating to me. Aburrir, things are boring to me. Importar, things are important to me. Quedar, things are remaining or left to me. Faltar, things are missing and it's happening to me. And this is not the missing like I miss my friends. This is more like I'm missing my keys or I don't have enough food, okay? It's something that you're lacking. Molestar is to be bothered by. Things can bother me. So these verbs are conjugated in a similar way as gustar, because instead of me actually liking something, I'm receiving the action. Instead of me actually being interested in something, things are actually interesting to me. And so, for example, if we wanted to say, I like to run, because in Spanish the concept doesn't exist to like, we have to say running pleases me. Me gusta correr. And in this sentence, correr is actually the subject. And then we conjugate gustar according to the subject. So we're going to use the third person singular, gusta. And then it's happening to me. Running is pleasing to me. So we're going to need to use the indirect object pronoun for me. And in Spanish, the indirect object pronoun for me is going to be me. And for you, informal, te. Him, her, or you, formal, le. Us, nos. You, plural, or them, is going to be les. Now, notice that this me is the same, looks the same as me, but you have to be careful because the letter E in Spanish is pronounced E, so be careful with your pronunciation there. It's really me. Me gusta correr, so it's happening to me. There's your indirect object pronoun. Let's look at another example. ¿Te interesa el libro? So in this sentence, does the book interest you? The book is the subject. We're going to conjugate interesar according to the subject, so it's going to be third person singular. Interesa, and we're asking, is it interesting to you? So the indirect object pronoun for you informal is Te. Okay. ¿Te interesa el libro? Is the book interesting to you? Notice that this is the same as the statement that would be the book interests you. All we've done is add question marks. So just like other questions that we may have learned to form in Spanish, these verbs are no different. Now, when we use the indirect object pronoun le, it can mean him, her, or you formal. So a lot of times we add a prepositional phrase on the beginning of the sentence to clarify who le is talking about. And we'll say to her or to him, running pleases him. And in order to do that in Spanish, we have to know the word for to, which would be a, and we have to know the prepositional pronouns. And in English, the prepositional pronouns would be to me, to you, to him, to her. In Spanish, they're all the same, almost exactly the same as the subject pronouns except for a couple. So the object of preposition pronouns we need to know because those are often used with these verbs for clarification or emphasis when we add a prepositional phrase on the beginning of the sentence. Let's look at an example. I think this will make more sense to you. So, a ella le fascinan los perros. To her, dogs are fascinating. And so perros is the subject. And we conjugate the verb according to the subject, so we have third person plural, because perros is plural. Los perros le fascinan. And it's happening to her, a ella. So there's our prepositional phrase. We're clarifying, because it could be a él, or it could be a usted, it could be to him, or to her, or to you. We're saying to her. And because is a preposition, we have to know the prepositional pronouns in Spanish. And for the most part, they're the same as the subject pronouns. For him, her, or you, it's going to be él, ella, usted. For us, it's going to be nosotros or nosotras. For you, plural, or them, it's going to be ustedes, ellos, or ellas. But for me, or you, informal. Okay? So if it's pleasing to me, and we're using the prepositional phrase to me, we have to say a mí. To me, running pleases me. So we could say a mí me gusta correr. Okay, and that's grammatically correct. I'm adding that on for emphasis. Notice that the me has an accent mark on it. This distinguishes it in spelling from the possessive me, but it doesn't change the pronunciation. So this is the prepositional pronoun me. It's correct to add this phrase, a prepositional phrase on the beginning of any of these. It's just most frequently used with le and les for clarification, but it can also be used grammatically correct, in a grammatically correct way on any of these sentences. Now, the indirect object pronoun for you informal is ti. Okay, so in this second example, we could say, a ti te interesa el libro? Become lowercase. A ti te interesa el libro? To you, is the book interesting to you? In English, that would be redundant. We don't say that, but in Spanish, it's grammatically correct and quite often used this way. Notice that ti does not have an accent mark. Only me has the accent mark. Okay, so let's look at another example. Nos importa estudiar. Studying is important to us. Okay. Estudiar is the subject. We conjugate importar according to the subject. Importa. And it's happening to us. Nos. If we wanted to add a phrase for emphasis, we could say a nosotros or a nosotras. We can add that. A nosotras nos importa estudiar. To us, to all girls, we Studying is important to us. Let's look at the next example. No les quedan dos lápices. They don't have two pencils left. Okay? Instead of putting the no right before the verb, notice that the no comes before the indirect object pronoun. With these verbs like gustar, the indirect object pronoun is never separated from the verb. We always have the no come before the indirect object pronoun. It does not go here. So we're saying they don't have two pencils left. Quedar means to have something remaining, left remaining to you. And what we're saying is they don't have two pencils left. Maybe they've already used up their pencils. So the subject is pencils, lápices. And we're going to conjugate the verb according to the subject, quedan. And we don't know who this is happening to. It could be them, it could be ustedes. So we can choose who we want this to be happening to. Since we have les, let's just say it's you plural. We could say, a ustedes no les quedan dos lápices. Okay. We don't have to add this phrase on. It's not grammatically incorrect to leave it off. So all of these sentences would be correct without it. Some of them are better for it because of the le and les being nebulous. And the next example is with the verb faltar. Me falta el dinero. Faltar in Spanish means to be lacking something. It doesn't mean to be missing your friends or missing your dog. It means to be missing something that's maybe kind of lost or something that you need and that you don't have enough of. Like maybe we don't have enough food, or we don't have enough clothing, we don't have enough money. Me falta el dinero is I'm lacking money. But in English we say I'm lacking money, but in Spanish it's the money is lacking and it's happening to me. I think this is one of the most difficult ones for us to grasp, because it's happening to me and the money is actually doing the action. So the subject is el dinero, and it's the thing that's lacking, so we have to conjugate faltar according to the subject dinero. And it's happening to me, me. Now, if we want to say, I'm not lacking money, where would we put the no? Okay? Because we know that to say I'm not lacking something, not is no in Spanish. Am I going to put it here? Am I going to put it here? We're always going to put it here. No me falta el dinero, because we don't separate the indirect object pronoun and the verb with these verbs. Okay. Notice that all of these verbs are being conjugated in the third person, singular or plural. Okay, they're all ending in a or an. Okay, gusta, interesa, fascinan, importa, quedan, and falta. The reason for this is that our subjects are usually things. In Spanish, these verbs are almost never conjugated in the first or second person. They're almost never conjugated where I'm doing the action, or you are doing the action, or we are doing the action. And the reason for this is, if we conjugate these verbs in that way, we're usually saying something inappropriate. So it's very important to conjugate these verbs in the third person, singular or plural, because if we conjugate them in the first or second person, then we're probably saying something inappropriate. So that's another thing you can pay attention to when you're checking your work. If you have one of these verbs, make sure you're conjugating in the third person, in the third person singular or third person plural. Let's look at the last example here. A ti te molesta el calor? To you, is the heat bothersome to you? So in Spanish, the subject is going to be el calor, the heat. And we're going to conjugate the verb molestar according to the subject. Molesta. And who's it happening to? Te. Okay, so we're going to have te. And for our little prepositional phrase for emphasis, a ti, to you. Okay. If we wanted to use the verb aburrir, which I didn't have an example of, we could say running is boring to me. Okay, so we could use this very same sentence here. And we'll just use the verb aburrir. Me aburre correr. Me aburre correr. Now, this is not an AR verb. The rest of the verbs are AR verbs. So, this is still third person singular or plural, but obviously we're going to conjugate it as an IR verb. Me aburre correr. Running is boring to me. A mí me aburre correr.